All right. So, hi. This is Shock Exchange, and this is on Trump and the GE, where we discuss the president's policies and how they affect the economy and the community. And today we would discuss Barbarians at the Gate for Endo International, and we will go over Barbarian number 4, which is in a series of 8 companies that we think would be would either have Endo International on its radar to make a strategic investment or either buy outright. I have with me Tori and Mitchell, of course. And before we get started, I'd like people to like the videos, subscribe to the channel, and share the video so we can get this information out to more people. In the picture for the YouTube video is Boone Pickens, who was a corporate raider back in the 80s, and he invested in the energy space. So he's like a oil tycoon, and he made a lot of noise back in the 80s with Michael Milken crowd and Ivan Boesky in terms of being a corporate raider. He's also a big time supporter of Oklahoma State University. I think their football stadium is named after him, Boone Pickens Stadium. Yep. He's a big supporter of Oklahoma State. So he's definitely an icon. He would have bought Endo, Endo 10 times already at these prices. So the gist is that Endo International, generic pharmaceutical company, is highly undervalued, and it is facing opiate litigation. And short sellers took advantage of that. They shorted the stock. It's a very thinly traded stock and drove the share price down to levels that were darn near criminal. And the stock still trades under 7 times EBITDA, which is highly undervalued. And so they kind of took advantage of the fact that, there was opiate overhang and there was question about how much Endo would actually pay for opiate litigation and could they afford to pay, given that they also had $8 billion of debt and some other issues. So we think the manipulation has gone too far, and we think Endo has a fiduciary responsibility to buy back its shares hand over fist. We also think that big pharma companies in the aesthetic space or want to be in the aesthetic space also have a fiduciary responsibility to buy Endo. It's only probably one of the few places you can put capital to work at a high ROI. So before we get started on Barbarian number 4, I'd like to sort of give an update on the goings on with Endo. Earlier this month, last month, Endo finally launched generic Chantix, and Chantix is a $1 billion market that helps people stop smoking. And Pfizer took Chantix off the market due to a potential correlation with cancer. So the government at Apotex, a Canadian company, sell generic Chantix in the U.S. just to address the market dislocation because there was nothing else on the market. And Pfizer sued Apotex earlier this month due to copyright infringement to try and keep Apotex out of the market. So that means that Endo could potentially have 100% of the market to itself until Pfizer sorts out its own issues with Chantix. It's a $4 billion market, and Endo's generic version actually have to be discounted to the branded price because it's a generic. But still, again, if it discounted 20% and took 80% market share, it could generate about $640 million in total revenue, full year revenue, which would make it Endo's second largest product behind Vasostrict and could potentially overtake Vasostrict if Vasostrict sales decline as we come out of the pandemic, because the Vasostrict sales were elevated around $786 million during the pandemic, and prior to the pandemic, it was about $553 million in sales. So it could potentially be Endo's largest product over time. So that's something that's I think important to the company to potentially have 100% market share for Chantix. Also, we know about the global opiate settlements. Endo settled with Louisiana, settled with New York, it's settled with Oklahoma. It's settled partially in some jurisdictions in Ohio and also in Tennessee. So the Louisiana settlement was interesting because it was the first state that's actually settled out of Oklahoma that settled fully with the big distributors in Johnson & Johnson, as well as with Teva and Endo. So we think that could possibly trigger some more settlements. The White House put out a statement earlier this week, where it is dictating what it wants the where it wants the opiate settlements to go. So I'm going to read somewhat of a press release here, which is I think important to Endo and Teva and some of the opiate manufacturers. So today, the Office of National Drug Council Policy announced the release of a model law for state legislatures that would help ensure opioid litigation settlement funds are directed to addressing addiction and the overdose epidemic and impacted communities and with public accountability. So the short answer is that it's going to establish, the law is going to establish, the states would establish a dedicated fund separate from the state's general treasury fund that's designated for targeted purposes and ensure that proceeds deposited into the fund remain separate from the state treasury general fund, do not lapse or revert to the general fund, and are not subject to fiscal limitations, so on and so forth. So it's a really first statement from the Biden administration on the opiate litigation, and Trump threw down, former President Trump threw down the gauntlet in late 2020. They basically settled with Purdue Pharma, and that set a pathway for a global opiate settlement with Johnson & Johnson, the big distributors. So it's hard to really use the funds if you don't settle. So hopefully, if this thing goes on too long, the litigation with Teva and Endo, hopefully Joe Biden will step in and say, look, let's get this opiate deal done. And so we here, Trump and GE, have basically talked about how the funds should be used. 100% of the funds should be used for treatment and prevention. Now you see the president now putting out a statement saying the same thing. Well, previously, these MOUs from states were saying that about 30% would go to state coffers and maybe 30% would go to the municipalities. Another 40% would go to where the harm was done. That template was put together by Ohio AG Dave Yost and the governor of Ohio, Mike DeWine. Now you see the president saying that all the funds should go to where the harm was created. And you're hearing that echoed by the AG of Louisiana and Missouri. So maybe this could, again, create a cascade of settlements now that people know it's all going to harm and where the harm was created and not going to state coffers. It could remove an incentive for state AGs to negotiate incessantly. So now we have state AGs doing that victory tour, almost like the Jackson 5 back in the day, doing that victory tour, where you have Joe Jackson and state AGs going around from city to city handing out checks. But New York AG, Letitia James, has been upstate New York and Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, handing out checks and getting some good publicity for herself. It could be a launch. It could help launch her bid for governor. You see the state AG of Louisiana, Missouri, the state AG of Alabama is handing out money from its settlement with McKinsey and Company. It stayed out of the opiate settlement. It hasn't signed on to the global opiate settlement, but did get money from McKinsey and is handing out those checks this week. Maricopa County, Arizona, settled, and then you see the state AG is getting good publicity for that settlement. So now you see the state AG doing a victory tour. Again, it could lead to, could create some inertia for a settlement for Endo and Teva. And then we're also waiting for a ruling out of California trial, for the California trial, where the judge Wilson has indicated that he's not sure what illegal activity actually took place. He basically said that everybody know that these opiate prescriptions were increased to help address chronic pain, and maybe the trade-off for that was more addiction. And everybody knew this. So if there's a favorable ruling out of California and said that there's been no law broken, or there's a settlement, a below market settlement, what I call below market settlement for Endo would be a settlement below what they paid in New York. Paid $50 million in New York, and that was under duress. But if they have a low settlement in California for Johnson, Teva, and Endo, it could send a message to the rest of these states to get this wrapped up. So that's been sort of the goings on as far as Endo is concerned. Also of note is that Donald Trump looks like he's launching his Truth Media, social media platform. He's merged it with a SPAC and that stock spiked this week. So it could be an opportunity for the president the former president, to get his message out and get his a narrative that's separate from what's coming from the corporate media. And again, we've always said here that probably the biggest gift to the public is that, especially African Americans, that he exposed the corporate media for being fake. It's been fake for African Americans since we've been here. So. And I think this may put pressure on Joe Biden to get other things done, particularly this opiate settlement, to say, hey, let's wrap this up. This has gone on way too long. So that's sort of the goings on with Endo. And the other thing would be that looks like the short sellers could be potentially reducing their short interest in their propensity to short the stock and drive the stock lower as earnings come up in a couple of weeks. So that's basically for Endo. I'll let Mr. Mitchell weigh in.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a lot, a lot since the last time we had this chat that's transpired. One of the things that, I guess, fortunately, we're seeing federal policy matching some of the things that we've been saying, some of the things that even state governors like Ohio State Governor, Ohio State AG has been saying as well, because I think we're well beyond the place of even using harm reduction tactics under the guise of a drug war or as a war on drugs to try to police addiction, and actually use policy to address it from the preventative lens, but also address it from the treatment lens, that this is not a criminal activity necessarily. The addiction itself, or being addicted, is not criminal in and of itself. The way that the drugs are procured or manufactured, distributed, though, that's where the criminality exists. But being an addict, certainly a victim of drug addiction, is not the criminality. And I think our community has been that guinea pig, as if there needed to be empirical data to support some common sense thinking. But if we ignore the racial terrorism that has been placed on the Black community, and simply look at this public policy approach through a scientific lens, then we can now rule out the conclusion that being a drug addict is criminal in and of itself, and that it is a treatment issue, and it should be treated as a treatment issue. And then looking at those potential causalities and the correlations, such as low opportunities by way of education, employment, income, etc. The decades upon decades of scholarship that exists that prove otherwise. And unfortunately, though, it has come at the crux of being politicized.
Exactly.
As much as these policies will help, and I do applaud the fact that Biden administration has finally kind of got their head out of their ass, frankly. But it's, to me, and in my humble opinion, I think it is just simply a ploy, because they're looking at the lowest polling rates, I think, in presidential history since polling has been taken. that Biden is received. He's 80 million votes, the highest vote count in the history of votership in this country, and not even 2 years later to already be suffering the lowest approval ratings across the country. So as much as Biden, I think we even had this conversation offline. Like, when was the last time we kind of seen Biden? Like, we're looking at the modern day FDR, and the fact that he's trying to hide that he's really in the wheelchair, right?
Right.
As they said, I forget who said it, but that if Americans had access to TV, then they wouldn't have voted for FDR because everyone would have known that he was in a wheelchair. So they were able to mask the fact that that he was disabled. And I think fast forward to the present, and we really have a president who is almost a complete 180 from the previous administration, right? The complaint was, oh my God, this man has too much access. He's too visible. This man, like, what other president gets on Twitter and starts clapping back at random people, random accounts that are tweeting at him? And so it was, we're going from hyper visibility to hypo visibility, and both have had to bear some consequences with that. And to me, I think that the low polling rates, low polling numbers, are a reflection of that hypo visibility by Biden. The fact that he, I've said it before, I make no qualms about it. This man has one foot in the grave. I think that this is the way that they get maybe Miss Harris, but this is me putting on my tinfoil hat, going in the conspiracy theory rabbit hole a bit. But but I stand by it. That, naturally, if this man drops dead over the course of the next few years that he has left, then we'll be looking at a Kamala presidency and accomplishing something that Hillary has attempted a few times, right? And unsuccessfully. So, in other words, to me, this is not about getting people real solutions. Because if they actually cared about this would have been something that would have been addressed in the first 30 days. The first 30 days he spent on representation by way of executive orders, not real access, not real resources into communities that are suffering at the hands of addiction. They have clearly not prioritized this. So to me, they're grabbing at straws. The win for the communities, the municipalities, the social services that need these resources just happen to luck up and be in the middle of the politicization of Biden trying to save, I guess what's left of his administration, and getting some support that he can tack on to for political capital when it comes to a reelection, if it comes to a reelection. So, I think that they're just a bit forward thinking in the sense of they're already thinking about what reelection is going to look like, what feathers in the cap can they market and campaign on to say that, well, we've done this, we've done that, we've done this, and just go down the checklist. So yeah, to me, unfortunately, that's the kind of downside, that it's not a genuine concern. It's not an authentic concern for the constituents, for the citizens.
But his first couple months in office was consistent with how he campaigned. He didn't really do much. It says basically said, "I'm not Trump," and then you have the midterm elections coming up. So that's going to be the first indicator of what the public really believes about. It's going to be his first report card, right? The midterm elections.
Exactly. So, I guess wanted to make that point that, I guess that's the downside is that, it's almost just lucky, right? Like lucky timing that this has been an issue within the country for over a decade. And yet it kept getting kicked down the road. Trump was, the first president to really, I think, address it head on. As you stated before, get a deal done. He was putting the pressure onto the states to get a deal done, putting pressure on the DOJ to get a deal done with Purdue Pharma. I think that's why we've seen such record time and force with getting these opioid manufacturers, distributors to the table, and frankly, admit participation. And at that point, is just simply negotiating a number. Biden has largely been silent since since winning the election on this issue. So to see federal policy come out of an administration that did not campaign on this issue, that has not vocalized the prioritization of this issue at any time since his presidency, and it's just kind of coming out of the blue, to me, that's the evidence that they are looking for political capital. They know that their numbers are low, that the likelihood of winning a second term is almost slim to nil, and you need something that affects the masses, wherein no matter what community you go into, what neighborhood, what class structure, what racial demographic, that you have to have something, a bullet in your chamber that allows you to connect with each one of those demographics to say, look what I did. And if it wasn't for me, then these things would not have happened. So unfortunately, those that have been suffering for the last decade and more, including the municipalities that have needed money, needed resources, as we've stated several times, states are going broke. They're scrambling for resources. This is one of the reasons why even the Biden administration injected over $8 billion to the IRS specifically for enforcement of taxes, because states are broke and states funnel those taxes up to the federal government. So without the collection and the efficiency within the collection process, states are looking at some empty coffers. And because these states are scrambling, these deals need to get done. And they have not prioritized that as an administration. So, but again, it's, I guess, for lack of a better term, is fortunate that, this is kind of lucked out this way. But yeah, it's, to me, it's just kind of sad. It's just sad. Like, I don't know how else to put it. That, this is what it takes. But, how can we be surprised when, apparently we live in a country whose democracy is being, kind of held hostage by 2 congressional members, like for 400 million people, 2 congressional members. This is the efficiency of the greatest country on the planet, supposedly. Okay. Like, what else can you expect? In other words, when we, how many soapboxes do we need to stand on? This country is in dire straits, economically, socially, politically. There's very serious, real threats that every intelligence agency, from NSA, DIA, CIA, FBI, have all made statements, have all been in congressional hearings that have articulated their concerns for rising militia, for a rising threat of a civil war because of the inefficiencies, the inequalities in this country. And yet, even with all of that, we still have politicians that are holding that ability for folks to get some resources hostage, simply because they're looking out for their own political self-interest and survivability. This is where we are. So it genuinely is a sad state of affairs. But, I guess we have to kind of count the lucky stars, even within those kind of sad times, or what seems a bit bleak. that there are going to be some resources, and this is a model. And I applaud this model. I applaud. I think every state should frankly uh, settle so that resources can get into the hands of the municipalities, get in the hands of social workers, the programs, the organizations that are on the ground doing the grassroots work in the communities that need the resources to get folks the treatment that they need. So, I even, as much as I get on Ms. James, uh, I applaud her efforts of, going upstate. Although, as I've stated before, that even her during this process politicized this process, and I think to me it became even more evident, and some of that was validated when it was exposed that she had been talking to some of former Governor Cuomo's donors behind the scenes, taking temperatures to see if she would get the support, have the money behind her in order for a gubernatorial run to be to be successful, right? So we've gotten that validation, and now she's trying to save some political face. But you know what? If that ends up in essentially paying folks off with bags of cash, then I applaud it. So be it, because at the end of the day, those are the same constituents that have family members. Those are the same constituents themselves that are suffering at the hands of addiction. So it becomes a win in that sense, even though it's a bit of a tainted win because of the political self-interest, in other words, but a win nonetheless. So, you got to take those wins, got to take those W's and just keep it moving and hope that the next fight will fare a bit better as well. So, a lot has been happening, and I think that we're going to see more states. I would love to see California, Texas, Florida, as some of the biggest states remaining to follow Louisiana and Arizona's example, and get settlements and get some of these state coffers filled, or I should say, really municipality coffers filled. So that the resources can get in the hands of the people that need it most.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that. But there's still to get a global opiate settlement signed. It's been signed, and I guess a template has been signed, but the municipalities have to sign on to it, and a certain percentage have to sign on to it before it's finally finalized. And so the fact that now everybody knows that all the money is going to the municipalities and going where the harm was occurred and going to treatment and prevention, it could spur people more municipalities and counties and cities to sign on, get this deal done now. As far as President Trump was the one who threw down the gauntlet on these opiate companies in 2017. Said, we're going to bring them to justice, and we're going to shed light on these issues and find out what they did, and they're going to pay. And now you saw state AGs across the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, get on board, and nobody gave Trump any credit. That's the one reason I didn't want Biden to become president, because I didn't want this global opiate settlement to linger on. Trump was still the president. There would have been opiate deals for Teva, Endo, Allergan already. And there'd be money in these communities already. He and the DOJ would have put pressure on the state AGs to put these money in the communities where the harm was done. And when he signed a deal with Purdue Pharma right before the election, it got pushed back from certain AGs, like the state AG, New York AG, Letitia James, Massachusetts AG, Maura Healey, were complaining about not only the size of the deal, I think it was like $4.5 billion. Not only were they complaining about the size of the deal, but they wanted to go after the Sacklers' personal wealth. They wanted to bring civil charges against them. And it's basically delayed and inevitable. And a judge this week said that he upheld the bankruptcy for Purdue Pharma, upheld the opiate deal, and said that and there's not going to be any civil charges against these people because, let's be honest, everybody knew what the Sacklers were doing. Purdue Pharma was, in instance, were the worst actors, but everybody knew what Purdue was doing. Purdue also had these a lot of these state AGs on its payroll, and some high-profile lawmakers in Connecticut and Tennessee were protecting Purdue Pharma. So now you see Letitia James is on board with the Purdue Pharma settlement. So now maybe we can get down to business, start with the press releases, and then pomp and circumstance and get these deals done. So I'm going to show. And so when you talk about what's going on with the government and Biden's under the gun, that's why we do these events. That's why we do Trump and GE. A lot of what we discuss. Obviously, Biden watched this show. Obviously, State AGs watched the show. They repeat what we say verbatim. So here's show you a tweet from a lady named Shelley Wiseman. I think she's a law professor at Georgetown, where she's trying to take credit for signing this deal with the White House agreement. So here goes. So here's a tweet from Shelley Wiseman, JD. It says, proud to have worked on this model state law released by the White House today to help ensure opioid litigation settlement funds are directed to addressing addiction and the overdose epidemic in impacted communities and with public accountability. So you see that people are trying to take credit for stuff that we've been talking about for a while now. So victory has victory has 1,000 fathers. Everybody's trying to take credit for the stuff that we've been talking about for months or maybe a couple of years now. So people are repeating what we say on Trump and GE verbatim, but nobody wants to give us credit. So we're kind of pushing these administration, we're pushing these state agencies to get these deals done and to provide real service for the public. So so now we're going to Barbarian number 4, and Barbarian number 4 is a large pharmaceutical company that generated about $6.1 billion in product sales in Q2. Its product sales grew about 3% year over year, which is really nothing to write home about. Its largest product treats arthritis. It represented about 19% of revenue. It actually fell 8% year over year. Its second largest product helps people deal with bone loss, address bone loss. It grew 24% year over year, and it represented 13% of total revenue. Its third largest product treats psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis, and it fell 5% year over year, and it represented 9% of total revenue. So we think that its psoriasis business, which basically fits under dermatology, would be a good fit with Endo. And what we call Endo's aesthetic business would be Quo and Xiaflex. And so this company actually paid, Barbarian number 4 actually paid about $13 billion for the psoriasis product, which represents currently over about 6.2 times run rate revenue. Paid 6 times run rate revenue, and that revenue is declining. A very competitive market, and revenue is declining 5% year over year. It may not even have the most effective product. Has a big brand name, but it may not have the most effective product. It has a lot of advertising dollars behind it. It's well known to the public, and its effectiveness may be waning relative to competition, because that's why you see revenue declining in the mid-single-digit percentage range. And it paid $13 billion for this product. $13 billion and 6.2 times revenue. Endo trades at less than 7 times EBITDA, and its EBITDA, revenue and EBITDA, are depressed because it's coming out of the pandemic, and also has some new products that are not fully reflected in its financial results. So we have, again, a big pharma company with $8 billion in cash. It has to do something with that cash. So they're willing to pay 6 times run rate revenue in the dermatology space. Why wouldn't it be willing to pay less than 7 times EBITDA for Endo and Endo's aesthetic, Endo's cellulite treatment, Quo, is expected to be a blockbuster and a potential game changer. And so we looked at Barbarian number 4, this dermatology business, and Xiaflex and Quo together. It would represent about a combined revenue of $654 million. Xiaflex would represent about 18% of that total revenue. And the revenue, on a combined basis, the revenue would decline 2% year over year, down from 5% year over year. And this, remember that Quo was only reported in Q2 for the first time. It's very nascent, and its revenue is expected to grow by leaps and bounds. So it can have an outsized impact on this company's dermatology business, and they could buy Endo at a cheap price. And this assumes that Moderna or Novavax don't get involved first, because Novavax is still having manufacturing problems, still hasn't launched its vaccine, still hasn't gotten
FDA.
emergency use authorization for its vaccine. Moderna's stock was just downgraded because
Right.
because the valuation it makes no sense, and it still hasn't found a way to address the fact that its vaccine revenue will wane in 2022. And then it's also some in some countries they're taking it off the market because of certain side effects. So both these companies have to diversify their revenue. They're both one-trick ponies at this point. And again, Barbarian number 4 has $8 billion in capital. It may not matter if Moderna or Novavax get there first. So this only makes sense for Barbarian number 4. And then we also talked about Gilead last week, where we talked about how Gilead paid 15 times projected 2024 revenue for Immunex, for oncology business, and it could have paid less than 7 times EBITDA for Endo. So these big pharma companies are entering into value destroying deals where it only makes sense to buy Endo from a strategic standpoint, also from a financial standpoint. So
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm sure at some point we've said it before, and that really, to me, this is indicative of what's happening on a macroeconomic level. Um, you can only fit within a market when you're already so large. As I always give the analogy of Shaq driving a Mini Cooper, right? Like, and a lot of these biopharma companies would be Shaq, and the economy would be the Mini Cooper. Like, you cannot grow beyond what's happening in the greater economy. And two, let's be very clear that this particular Barbarian has been under some additional pressure because they were specifically targeted in a 41-page government document talking about the price hikes. So they are already under scrutiny that you are simply looking to not increase production, or you've hit a cap on increasing production. You don't have any kind of new drugs that will be rolling out in a short term in order to have some positive earnings news. So what do as a biopharma company? Well, you spike prices. And, as we saw really under the Obama administration, where price hikes had become national news, had gotten an intense spotlight as a result, every administration, subsequent administration, has continued to kind of keep that pressure on these biopharma companies. That inversions was the thing 10 to 12 years ago at this point. So by way of reducing liability, by way of reducing tax exposure, by way of keeping the ability to keep money and earnings offshore as well. So what did Eric Holder do? Bust up the kind of the offshore industry, and simply just brought it onshore. That's why no one really went to prison, because the U.S. was just simply looking at that as an industry that should be brought in-house, so to speak. So, in other words, we've seen the succession and the evolution of how biopharma companies have tried to continue to keep shareholder value increasing. And to me, it just states the inevitable. Continuing to grow and grow and grow and grow without ever having a correction is unrealistic. It's insane. It's impossible. At some point, you need some deflation to hit a share price. You can't, not every day is going to be a sunny day. Not every day is going to be 80 degrees. I mean, that's kind of what it seems like the expectation is that every day I wake up, I'm going to hear the birds chirping. They're going to, like a Disney film, the birds are going to get my clothes folded and they're going to wake me up. It's going to be at the door. The sun is going to be shining. And, I get to skip to work and be completely stress free. And, my stock portfolio is up 3,000%. And, the water I drink is always clear. It's, what I mean? It's unrealistic. And it's like some of that is on the shareholders.
Are you doing this on location from Flint, Michigan?
Right. Exactly, right?
Well, you said the water's always clear.
Matter of fact, I'm getting a little thirsty. So I'm gonna take a sip. Right. Oh man, shouts out to shady politicians. Boy, I tell you, man, some of these folks ain't got no damn scruples. And is disgusting, frankly. I don't care who they are. Y'all know who I'm talking about.
Right.
But anyway, some of that human nature needs to be corrected. Because it's just unrealistic to expect things to continue going up. And hence this 41 page kind of hit piece that is calling out specific companies for their price hiking campaigns, because a lot of the existing drugs in their pipeline are drugs that, some folks may be surprised to know that at least six out of every 10 adults in this country are on some prescription drugs. I think at least one prescription drug. It's like 6 to 7 adults. This is a highly medicated population. So biopharmas are constantly scrambling to find what's the next thing, and how do we continue growing revenue. So in other words, this lends to the Gilead playbook, where Barbarian number 4 looked at Gilead and said, hey, they overpaid, so why don't we overpay?
Right.
So, we got money to burn. So
right.
We at least have to show shareholders that we were trying, and they already attempted at a merger, kind of buying out another biopharma company. Unfortunately, DOJ kind of busted it up due to antitrust law, so that was unsuccessful, and found kind of a bigger fool to buy out their buyout. And so in other words, it's just money going right out of the window with no real even promises of a high ROI. And where I'm from, we say promise is a comfort to a fool. So so in other words, there's political pressure, there is social pressure, and then there is investor class pressure on this company to start righting the ship. And to me, the culmination of all of these things is putting a target on the back of their M&A group. So this, in other words, this now puts a target on Endo's back, because as we've stated, pretty much at every one of these, that this is deeply undervalued. We've seen significant covering in the last 6 weeks, especially since Endo filed S3, so we know that they at least put out their intentions to buy back shares. That's the one question mark that we continue to have. We don't know for certain. We will have an idea if they bought back shares, and how many shares that they bought back by November 5, when earnings comes out. almost certain that it will be announced or certainly asked on the investor call that morning as well. So we'll find out definitively. I think that we've watched shorts kind of get out of the way, as I've stated even in the last broadcast, that shorts they must know something. With the aggressiveness that they have shown over this past year, which almost seemed like it was going to be unabated. When you have folks that are doubling, tripling, quadrupling down in the face of spiking stock prices by way of GME, by way of AMC and other meme stocks, it just shows you that common sense and rational decision making was not on the short side, and it was a lot of emotion, a lot of bravado that put a lot of capital on the line, and a lot of capital got blown up. But the question is, where is that confidence coming from? Where is that bravado coming from? And that bravado really hasn't stopped for the first 6 to 7 months of the year, which to me explained why we were seeing the short activity that we have been seeing for Endo. That these people will just not stop. Although Endo's balance sheet was getting stronger, although the pipeline was getting stronger, although the the settlements, the opioid settlements were getting settled and slowly making their way into the news cycle. So all signs are pointing up for Endo, and yet shorts were continuing to short. So the question would become, where's the motivation? Where's the information that would make shorts so confident? So to see shorts kind of getting out of the way, in other words, there has to be a pretty big boogeyman that would shake these folks that have almost stood without weapon in hand in front of a bear and said that they're going to fight this bear, bare-fisted. Because that's the kind of gravitas, so to speak, that these shorts have been showing. And as the saying goes, it's like, well, they're either really brave or they're really stupid. It's like only time will tell which one it is. And in my opinion, specifically when it comes to Endo, I've been vocalizing where they're on the side of stupid, not brave, because unless there's been some information that shareholders are not aware of, that the general public is not aware of, that they should be steering clear of Endo, it has yet to make its way onto any analyst headlines, front page headlines, certainly investor news headlines. So this would be the first time that I've ever seen shorts be so confident, have nothing backing it up by way of reporting. So with that type of, I guess, bravery or stupidity, but with that type of ego involved, that bear that is starting to have them look at their ego and realize, well, maybe it's not as big as they thought it was and start to retreat a bit. That bear has to be pretty massive, in other words. So I think that shorts must know something, maybe something in their networks are rattling their cages a little bit, letting them know, hey, we got to start covering, we got to start steering clear, because whatever it is that they're expecting is starting to make its way, and is going to potentially take them out, eat into profits that they have been kind of wallowing and slathering themselves in over this past nearly year of short thing. So, it's, to me, it's an indication that party's over. But I guess we'll find out what that indication is. Maybe we'll hear some news that'll give us some clarity on that with this earnings call. But at the end of the day, even at these levels, Endo is significantly, deeply undervalued. So with Barbarian number 4, you can make an argument that they're not stupid. Maybe some past acquisitions would be contrary to that statement, but capacity to scoop up and to quickly scoop up an Endo at these levels, absolutely. The cash on hand alone makes them a potential player in the game to be able to scoop up shares on the cheap. Even pushing some of the shorts out of the way. Certainly if I'm speculating what is a big bear that if I'm a short that is going to move me out of the way, it would certainly be any sort of rumor or phone call. Hey, there's a couple barbarians at the gate.
Right. Right.
There's a couple possible acquisitions happening. I think worst case scenario, if I'm Endo, certainly if I'm a short, is a bidding war where you're getting more than one barbarian. Now looking at Endo, seeing the potential from Quo, from generic Chantix, from Vasostrict, and the fact that they have 17 to 20 other drugs that will be debuting, over the next 24 months, when each one of the barbarians that we have pointed out has had issues when it comes to natural revenue growth through sales. And here you have a company that is growing through the same mechanism that you are struggling with. So, in other words, I think we're going to see a dog fight on our hands. So if I'm a short, that's something that, Monday, I'm closing out my position. I'm going to enjoy my profits, take the win and move on to the next opportunity. If I'm Endo, I am certainly going to be buying shares hand over fist to protect our position and certainly prevent, being bought out for pennies on the dollar, and especially end up in a dogfight where there are a couple of big biopharma companies that could scoop up the entire company just like that. And at these prices, I don't really see shareholders voting against a buyout. If it is attractive enough, shareholders have been on a freaking roller coaster for the last 3 to 4 years with Endo and have stood steady. And at this point, some of that loyalty needs to be rewarded. So if one of the barbarians makes a more than fair offer, I really don't see shareholders turning that offer down to finally close out a position that they've held on to for the last 4 to 5 years with Endo.
Okay, those are all fair points. I mean, for the big pharma companies, I think you can grow revenue. They've traditionally grown revenue through price hikes on R&D or acquisitions, but the price hikes are, this is not the political environment to hike prices. And politicians from Bernie Sanders to Hillary Clinton to President Trump, former President Trump, have been exposing price hikes for years. So this isn't the political environment to hike prices. You can try to grow through R&D, and that's a crapshoot because you spend billions of dollars and with uncertain return. And Gilead's looking at that now. Their so-called vaunted R&D portfolio hasn't panned out. And or you can make acquisitions, and those are acquisitions in this market. The Dow at 34,000, 35,000. The Fed has pushed the Dow up, but it's pushed big pharma into value destroying acquisitions. And Gilead and Barbarian number 4 are suffering for it. Whoever gets Endo or makes a strategic investment in Endo, because it may be hard to make an acquisition outright till these opiate litigations is completed. Whoever makes a strategic investment in Endo at less than 7 times EBITDA could be the envy of the pharmaceutical industry. Gilead was the envy of the pharmaceutical industry when they made a blockbuster acquisition of Pharmasset years ago, which came with Sovaldi, its blockbuster HCV drug. So whoever makes an investment in Endo could be the envy of the pharmaceutical industry, and you have other M&A teams from these big pharma companies could be reeling and could be on the hot seat. We know Barbarian number 8 is receiving pressure from an activist investor as far as growing its revenue. They don't want to hear any excuses. Growing its stock price, growing revenue, growing earnings. And how do you do that in this environment? You can't do it through price hikes. You likely can't do it through R&D, and you have to make acquisitions at an attractive ROI. And Endo is the only one out there. For Endo longs, I think Endo has a lot of shots on goal. I think the company's highly shorted based on its effective float. These shares are not owned by institutions and insiders. It's more highly shorted than AMC and GameStop. And we point that out effectively. That if you want to buy a stock that's a short play or potential rise due to as shorts begin to cover, or I look at it as more, it's beginning to trade as closer to its intrinsic value of about $25 to $30 a share. It's already doubled since September. We're the only ones talking about the stock. We're the only ones talking about it. And it still has room to run just to get to its intrinsic value. Forget a short squeeze, just to get like a $25 to $30 a share. That's still, a multiple of where it's trading now. So we could trade closer to the intrinsic value. You could have shorts begin to cover. You could have more opiate settlements in certain states, or a global settlement. God forbid. You could have a favorable ruling out of California. You could have a very strong Q3 earnings, which I expect, and very strong Q4 earnings, because generic Chantix's not in these numbers right now, and core expected growth through leaps and bounds. So there are a lot of shots on goal. We've talked about people taking off these stop limits, because right now short sellers are looking to exit, and they're also hunting for stop limits, and they're trying to drive the stock down and trigger stop losses. So then drive the stock down even further and buy the stock and cover their positions on the cheap. So we ask people to take off stop losses or stop limits. So if you feel like you need to have a stop limit on a $4 stock, don't buy it. Don't buy it. Don't sell it. Don't trade it. Go buy Apple. Because now all you're doing is delaying the upside for Endo. So the last shots on goal for Endo is probably a unicorn in terms of how undervalued it is. So that's basically it. And whoever gets Endo, which one of these Barbarians buy Endo, is going to put other people on the hot seat, and you can have other activist investors lurking around asking, why'd you miss on Endo, and how are you going to get your share price up? So that's basically that's Trump and the GE, Barbarians at the gate for Endo. Anything else, Mr. Mitchell?
No, I would just encourage our few listeners that we appreciate tuning in. Don't forget to, like, subscribe, and share, but also questions and comments. We welcome them. Like I stated, any question that is asked, we'll try to get it answered during the broadcast as well. So, we welcome you all to join the conversation and participate. We want to hear what you all's thoughts are as well, not just when it comes to Endo or the opioid crisis, but even kind of sociopolitically and economically, kind of current events and what those impacts are on some of the subject matters that we're covering. So we definitely want to hear from you all. We appreciate your viewership, because you all could be watching anything in the wide, vast world of YouTube and every other platform. So definitely join the conversation, like, subscribe, and share if you do appreciate the content that we're putting out.
Okay, so that's Trump and the GE, also known as Just That Heat. So we'll see you back in a week. Thank you.